Hey, so this video just came out, and I decided to pull a 2009 move and make a video reply. If you haven't seen the original, you really should go watch it before continuing, as the rest of this video will make no sense otherwise. Also, if you haven't played Cave Story, you really should do that before watching either this video or Skyhoppers, as both of our videos go into major spoilers for the game. Okay, final warning to leave and do those things. Okay, you've played Cave Story and watched Skyhopper's video? Good. Now then, I've split this video up into 3 parts. You're currently in the first part, where I'm about to give my overall thoughts on the video. It's good! This is an interesting angle to look at the game from that I don't think I've ever heard before. That said, I haven't browsed the theory section of the forums a ton, so maybe it's a repeat, I don't know. Okay, but now it's time for part 2 and 3. This is the part where I talk about all the nitpicks, and then the more major issues I have with the video. As a disclaimer though, I don't think anything I've found actually invalidates the whole thesis. It's more just a bunch of stuff I think should be revised, if the topic is ever revisited. I'm going to go in chronological order with the nitpicks, then the same order with the major things, just because the nitpicks are super tiny and I can blast through those real quick. With one exception. I'm going to bring up the spoiler warning near the beginning of the video first. Personally, I disagree with the main sentiment that knowing the story doesn't ruin the game in this case. I think you do lose something in Cave Story if you know how all the story beats go. I mean, heck, all the important emotional character deaths are spoiled in this video. Not that knowing those will ruin the game for someone, but it's going to change how they react for sure. But more importantly than my opinion on this warning, is the fact that you've already spoiled much of the game by this point. Grasstown, Hellby 2, Outer Wall, Storehouse, and True Last Cave are all shown as B-roll in the background before the spoiler warning pops up. While I'm sure someone who's never played the game would probably have no clue these areas are important, it still seems a little irresponsible to me to use these areas so late in the game. Well, not Grasstown, that's fine. But I would definitely never use Storehouse cutscene footage, B2 footage, and I would probably even shy away from using Outer Wall personally. The biggest thing here though is Quote's name. Dude, you literally say you don't learn this until much later in the game.
Our player character, Quote, although we don't actually learn his name until much later.
That's best ending path stuff. So yeah, I would have put the spoiler warning way before all of that. But whatever, let's blast through the nitpicks.
Independent video game production was, though not unheard of, certainly under the radar.
Commander Keen is id Software, and Jazz Jackrabbit is Epic. Unless I've gone absolutely crazy, I don't think either of those companies were ever indie creators, even back when those games were made.
A story which is powerful and poignant, which introduces a cast of adorable, memorable characters only 12 pixels tall.
I'm sorry, what characters are 12 pixels tall? Most regular-sized NPCs in Cave Story use a 16 by 16 space to hold their sprite. I checked much of the main cast, and the shortest one is Toroko at 13 pixels tall. Everyone else, Curly, King, Sue, Santa, Jack, etc., they're all between 14 and 16. I probably spent more time measuring these sprites than I should have, but you know, I didn't spend all this time modding Cave Story to have it go to waste.
Also has access to important moral choices which affect the outcome of the game.
There's like 1, maybe 2 important moral choices. Yeah, I guess that counts for using the plural choices. Moving on.
This is our first time seeing the Doctor himself, and he is as intimidating and sinister as one would expect.
I mean, you do actually see the Doctor on the title screen, and you could have maybe figured it out it was him due to the frozen Misery and Balrog hanging around, but okay, sure.
While some of them do survive the events of the game, the ones with specific personalities, the ones the player really gets to know, all die.
Yeah, Jack just kind of disappears after Plantation happens, so I don't know if I'd say that was a heart-wrenching death.
In order to save Kazuma, he first has to find a key for the lazy Mimiga Santa.
Lazy? Choco literally calls him a scaredy cat, and there's tons of enemies around his key. I'd definitely call him more a coward than lazy.
By the way, what are these frog guys doing here?
You know, I've never thought about how either of those two got there. I mean, there's gotta be some business because Chaba's down there too, so I don't know.
Does this fact redeem Balrog, who expressed zero regret or hesitation when feeding Toriko the red flower? No, absolutely not. Fuck you, Balrog.
Hey, don't say that about Balrog. I think it absolutely does excuse him for doing that. Like, look, he's right in front of the Doctor and Misery. I don't think he stood a chance if he tried anything other than doing exactly what the doctor ordered. And for all we see, he wasn't given a chance to be empathetic. I would be optimistic and say that he would regret it given the chance. And there we go. That's the last of the nitpicks. Now, onto the serious stuff.
In the basement of Arthur's abandoned house, there are remnants of some half-eaten red flowers, implying that even he partook of them.
I don't think there's enough evidence to suggest Arthur actually used the red flowers. How do we know someone else didn't leave the red flowers there? It seems like it's been a while since he died, so there should be enough time for King to do something. Or maybe they are Arthur's, but he was using them for research? There's nothing in the sprite that says he actually ate them. The only other time they're used is in plantation to represent growing red flowers. I don't know, maybe I'm just biased by the fan depictions of Arthur. All the ones I've seen just have him as a nice, strong guy, no red flowers needed. On the other hand,
King is the other Mimiga who chooses to fight and protect the village at all costs, but unlike Arthur, rejected the idea of the red flowers.
this has already been brought up by other people, but yeah, King did actually use red flowers. It's been confirmed multiple times that he cooked them in some way before ingesting them. That's how his eyes got all red. In conclusion, I would argue that this symbolism is kind of backwards. I don't think it actually defeats any of the overall message being described here, but, you know, moving on.
Farming the plants are not the many various minions the Doctor has under his control, but rather more Mimiga.
What minions? As far as we know, the Doctor has Misery and Balrog. That's it. He's using the Mimiga because 1, they're easily manipulable, telling them of an oncoming killer robot threat. 2, he has a lot of them due to his earlier abducting. And 3, he doesn't have much else. You could argue he maybe controls the trolls to some extent, given that they're all hanging around the plantation, presumably to keep the Mimiga in check, but it's not like he controls the millions of critters and bats you've been blasting through. Even if he could control the other enemies, I can't think of any good candidates for red flower farming. I'll expand more on this later.
To me, this represents that the power and animosity of these boss creatures was entirely man-made.
I'm pretty sure the Doctor has nothing to do with these guys. Nothing in the rest of the game suggests that the Doctor has any control over mechanical stuff, and given how much technology we do see around the island, teleporters, computers, whatever system is running Egg Corridor, I don't think it's unreasonable to say that these are just weird cyborg creatures that came to be on their own. I would argue that Omega is just some weird robot thing that lives in the Sand Zone. Monster X is actually controlling the mech of his own volition, and Ironhead, he's directly ripped from one of Pixel's other games, Ika-chan, so he's just a fun reference. I will say though, I've never thought about Omega being a modified Sandcroc, mostly because he doesn't have that long straight snout, or an eye in the normal spot. Also, Sandcrocs don't have feet. Yeah, maybe that's why I've never thought of it. But anyways, whether or not a different set of humans modified them, that's probably up for debate, but as far as I see it, they aren't a result of the Doctor. They're just some of the island's weird inhabitants.
All the eyes in the rocks in the labyrinth and on the balcony were clues that there was something deeper in the island.
Honestly, I would be really surprised if those eyes were actually supposed to reference hell, but I'll get into why a little bit later.
Only she knew about the entrance to the sanctuary. Only she knew enough to end the cycle of violence forever.
I guess? Really, there's still contention in the community as to how Curly got into hell, but most of the time I've heard people discuss it, the current consensus is that it's just magic, unless you really want to believe in this quality image. I'm going to explain this a bit better in a moment too, but for now, I'll just say that I don't think Curly actually knew of the true source of oppression to go and beat it. She was just along for the ride.
Jenka, who is his older sister, tried to simply seal him away. Over time, though, she aged until the point we meet her in the game, unable to maintain her structures and letting the evil leak out.
I think the end message here is fine, but the reasoning doesn't stand up. Balos' evil didn't leak out. It's Misery's fault that the Demon Crown exists, and that's what's been causing the issues ever since. Jenka's goal was to imprison Balos in the island, but when he started to make it crash down, she made the core to keep it afloat, and hid it in the labyrinth. Until Quote comes along and destroys the core, it seems as though that labyrinth core setup is working just fine. Was it still a bad idea to not just kill off the source of the evil earlier? Yeah, probably, but at the same time, Balos is her brother, so I can see why she didn't.
Now, if I was someone else, I could just say this was a poor writing choice, that in wanting there to be a difficult secret ending, the creator messed up the message he had built with the rest of the narrative.
Honestly, that theory isn't too far off. It's not so much developer wanting harder ending messes up message, but it's more like playtesters wanted harder challenge and better ending, so dev has to slap something on at the end. By the way, this is where I'm going to explain the eye stuff and the curly stuff that I kind of skipped over earlier. It's pretty common knowledge that a big part of the reason the best ending exists at all is because playtesters were unsatisfied with the current best ending, what we now call the normal ending, both for its story and for its challenge. But at this point, the game was pretty much done. The final boss rush, the escape sequence. So what did Pixel do? He tacked on the ability to save Curly and put a super hard extra area right at the end. One that kinda has to exposition dump you as you play, so you actually know what's going on. As such, I don't like using the circumstances leading up to the best ending in most serious theories, since the better explanation is usually just Pixel rushed it near the end. The eye blocks were made for Labyrinth long before the best ending was ever conceived, and Hell's eyes are just Balcony's eyes with a different palette. It's laziness or asset reuse. As for the other stuff, how does ignoring Booster keep him alive? Or how does saving Curly make a door unlock and a random hole in the floor open right at the end of the game? How did Curly even get to Hell to help you? Who knows? You guys just wanted a better ending with more challenge, right? Right? My point is to maybe take the best ending circumstances with a grain of salt. They weren't thought out from the very beginning of development, like everything else in the game was. As one final note, however, finding the exact proof for this claim was more difficult than I thought it would be. I couldn't find any direct evidence to playtesters flat out saying the normal ending's too easy. But you can see Pixel, in somewhat broken Google Translated English, making initial plans for the best ending 6 months before release. We can also see evidence of the best ending's late addition in the final game's map numbers, which are in the order he made the maps. Everything relating to the best ending, Waterway Cabin, Alternate Prefab House, Sacred Grounds, etc., was added after all the normal endings maps had long been complete. I've left the sources for this theory in the description if you want to try digging through the Japanese yourself for more proof.
And their robotic nature serves an important logical purpose within the game. The Doctor has no power over them.
Okay, here's where I get to talk about the Doctor and the Demon Crown. Almost sounds like a bad sitcom. We see in Cave Story that the Doctor has the ability to control Misery, because she was cursed by the crown when it was made, control Balrog for some unknown reason, float, teleport himself, but not other people, like Misery can, and we hear that it lets him control Enraged Mimiga. That's it. Honorable mention goes to the lightning we see in Storehouse, but I'm 99% sure that's Misery summoning that, not the Doctor. All the other stuff we see him do, shooting energy balls, shooting bats, becoming super buff at the end, was a result of the red crystal, which doesn't even require the Demon Crown as far as we're aware. The only reason he can control Sue and Misery at the end is because he's in this weird pure red crystal energy form. Nowhere in the default set of Demon Crown abilities can he directly control anything else, except maybe the trolls. But I honestly wouldn't be too surprised if he just used his powers of language to convince them. It's what he would have had to do for the normal Mimiga anyways. So yeah, the fact that he can't control robots isn't really an amazing point, since he can't really control much. Man, Demon Crown honestly, not that great a deal. He can barely do anything. Also, regarding this comment,
Well, he can transform the Mimiga, the humans, and even Misery, who may or may not be human.
Cave Story treats Witch as a different race from human, at least as far as I can tell. So Misery and Jenka are both witches, not humans. That just is their race.
For example, I couldn't make much sense of Misery and Balrog's characters in the context of the messaging, and I mostly skipped over the plantation section of the game, including the characters of Momorin and Aito.
Yeah, I don't have much on those four. You could maybe argue that Misery is the one who started this whole mess, since without her, the Demon Crown wouldn't exist. But to make that make any sense with the oppression and stuff, we would have to try and justify why she made the Demon Crown, which is another round of theory discussion entirely. So yeah, that's it. Those are my thoughts on the theory. A really interesting take, with only a few relatively minor complaints that could easily be revised in a version 2 of the theory. Skyhopper, I have no clue if you actually plan on making a part 2 of this theory, but I would love to see what you take away from this response. I've left some links in the description that are about some of the theories that I kinda mentioned throughout the video, so go take a look at those if you want. Also, a list of credits can also be found in the description. I borrowed some stuff from some other people to make this video, so anything that I borrowed has been linked in the description. Other than that, thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.